Great, and we will get started. So to introduce myself, I'm Sama Vanzo-Windet, Deputy Director at Learning and Work Institute, and I'm really pleased to be chairing this breakout in particular. I think thinking about people's progression in work is a really massive topic. It's a big challenge facing us, and all of our speakers here today have some really great insights to share with us on sort of retraining, changing careers. We're going to be looking at the sort of scale of that challenge that's facing us across the UK. So people that want to change careers, why there is a challenge there. We're also going to be looking at some of the solutions, why it's important, and thinking about also in the context of the whole conference, locality, levelling up. How that all fits. So thinking about these things locally. I am going to. I think everybody has got their camera switched off. So well done. You're all muted. That's great. We're going to hear first from my colleague Emily Jones of Learning and Work Institute, our head of research, and she's going to talk to us about the retraining challenge. We're then going to hear from Karen Johnson at Teen Housing. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Ian Kaplan from the Department for Work and Pensions. So we're going to get a very rounded perspective on this topic. And there'll be a time for questions at the end. So I've got my chat open here, and I really want to see questions that you're sort of come to mind from the speakers. And that things that you'd like to probe a bit further and things that come up. So if you can post in the chat your questions and thoughts and comments, I will come to them after our speakers. But without further ado, I think, Emily, I'll hand over to you if that's okay, and let you get on with. So Emily Jones is our, as I say, Head of Research at Learning and Work. Emily.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for this session on retraining. Hopefully you can see my slides there. My name is Emily Jones. I'm Head of Research at Learning and Work Institute, and I lead our work on lifelong learning, apprenticeships and technical education. I'm here today to talk about our flagship project, New Futures, where we're supporting people who've been affected by the pandemic to reskill and change career. As we know, the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic caused disruption in the labour market, and while the economy is now recovering, employment remains nearly 600,000 lower than before the pandemic, and we've seen a rise in the number of people who are economically inactive. The impact of the pandemic on the labour market has not been evenly spread and has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities. So some sectors have been hit harder than others, such as hospitality and leisure, and people on lower incomes, single parents, disabled people, and people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds have seen some of the largest drops in incomes and jobs. It's also important to note that long-term trends were already reshaping the labour market before the pandemic, including an ageing population, advances in technology and automation, Brexit and the transition to a net zero economy. And these trends will continue to affect jobs that are available and the skills that the economy needs. And workers will need access to training to ensure that their skills remain current and that they can switch jobs or careers when needed. In this context, we included questions on career change in our annual adult participation in learning survey. A third of adults told us that they want to change job or career in the next 1 to 2 years. Respondents who have experienced a change to their work status since the start of the coronavirus pandemic are more than twice as likely to want to change job or career compared to those who have not experienced any changes. And 69% of those who say they want to change job or career are also more likely to say that they want to develop their skills in order to do so. And again, we see this is more pronounced where respondents have had a change in their work status. To address the reskilling challenge, we believe there's a need for high quality, locally based programmes of career change support to engage at-risk workers to and deliver skills provision to meet the needs of the current and future jobs. So with support from the COVID-19 Support Fund, we're running new futures aimed at tackling the UK's retraining challenge, and we will be running 5 place-based pilots to test potential solutions to reskilling and career change at a local level. The pilots are based across the UK, so in Edinburgh, Belfast, Tees Valley, Devon and Swansea, and the models that we test will be tailored to those local labour markets. All of the pilots will support adults whose jobs have been affected by the pandemic, and they will include particular elements. So tailored and targeted outreach activity, high quality careers advice and coaching, flexible models of training delivery, and funding for community-based charities to build longer term capacity to provide support beyond the lifetime of the pilots. Alongside the pilots, we are undertaking an evaluation to help establish an evidence base on what works in supporting reskilling for career change. And we will also be using what we learn to influence local and national policy to think about scalability and transferability to other areas and other contexts. Before I finish, I just want to briefly describe some of the key elements of the pilot we're running in Devon, because we're really pleased to be joined by Karen Johnson from Teen Housing today, who is a key delivery partner in that area. The pilot is led by Devon County Council in partnership with Teen Housing, local learning providers and careers advice services. Based on the jobs that will be available in the local area, the council has chosen to focus on jobs in the construction and sector and in retrofit. In addition to skills training, career changers will be able to access one-to-one mentoring and coaching, which will continue as they start a job. And Teen Housing will play a key role in engaging tenants who want to change job or retrain into a new career, and provide sustained support as people access different services and provision. And through this, we hope to learn more about the role that housing associations can play in supporting people to reskill and change career. I won't say any more on the specific pilot now, as Karen will be able to say more about the context in Devon and also what they hope to get from the pilot. But if you would like any further information about New Futures, or you'd like to work with us, then feel free to get in touch using the email address on this slide. And I look forward to your questions and discussions after the panel. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Emily. A very brief outline of the work that we're doing at Learning Work, focused on retraining and career change right across the UK through our New Futures pilots. So hopefully that's useful information for everybody and you've got questions about that. But as you say, handing straight over to Karen from Teen Housing, who's going to talk to us specifically about one of the pilots that she's involved in Devon. Over to you, Karen. Karen, have you unmuted? I can't hear you.
Is that better?
I can hear you now.
So sorry, I thought I had unmuted. Thank you, Sam, and thank you so much, Emily. We are so pleased to be working with you and Devon County Council on the New Futures project. So good morning, everybody. My name's Karen Johnson and I work for Teen Housing. I look after the HR, IT, communication, resident involvement departments in Teen Housing. So I've got quite a lot of things on my portfolio. I thought I would start by telling you a little bit about Teen Housing. We've got around 3,700 stock across the Teignbridge area in Devon, but we have our own in-house development team and we're building all of the time. We have a team of Head Start staff. And what they do is they work with all the other partners in Devon and signpost people back into work and skills. They work very closely with the DWP. They also give advice on benefits and advice on kind of tenancy sustainment and growth. We are governance and viability. We have the top marks for governance and viability from our regulator, and we are very much looking forward to the new consumer standards that's coming in that we've heard about this morning from the Social Housing White Paper and Levelling Up. We have our own wholly owned subsidiary, which is called Templar Home Build, and that enables us to provide our very own repair service and maintenance service to our residents. And that makes us quite unique, really, and we plan to use this as part of our work with the New Futures project, which I'll tell you a little bit about more in a moment. We have our own Gypsy and Traveller site, we have an independence and wellbeing service, and we provide a teen care alarm service in the community. Our digital strategy has really accelerated over the past couple of years, and we're proud to say that we're an Investors in People Platinum company that employ 150 staff. So even though we're quite a small to medium housing association, there's lots and lots of strands to our portfolio. Gosh, the pandemic has really changed the way we work, and we found that we've had to future-proof our skills for our staff. If I can just tell you that before the pandemic, we had all of our servers in-house, all of the staff attended work in the office. It was very, very rare that people worked from home. And over the past 2 years, we've completely transformed. We've now got, we've introduced agile working. We've got the majority of our staff working from home. We are providing digital services to our customers as well as face-to-face. We've been very careful to maintain both where we can. And we have moved all of our servers to the cloud. So we are a very, very different company than we were 2 years ago. So what does that mean for our staff? You can see on the screen there, we've had to do quite a lot of work around resilience, emotional intelligence. We've had to really uplift digital skills of our staff. So our training department, our learning department has been key to support this transition. But also, this has been really, really important for our residents because, you know, overnight, our residents started engaging with us digitally when they've been used to a predominantly face-to-face service. We have heard from our residents that isolation has been an issue throughout this pandemic. People have struggled with their mental health. We certainly know from our statistics that antisocial behaviour has gone up, particularly as events that we would normally run in the community have reduced. Our Head Start team have been working closely with our residents that have been furloughed. And of course, throughout the pandemic, we were helping residents who were experiencing unemployment and redundancy. And this also led to a loss of confidence with our residents. So our Head Start teams and our housing teams are doing everything they can to support our residents to improve on these areas. One of the things we're looking at is obviously working with Devon on our New Futures project. Now, we're looking at this from both our residents' perspective and our staff's perspective. We have, like most people now, like most companies now, an ambitious net zero decarbonisation strategy. Part of that is modernising our houses, our stock, with retrofit components to ease utilities, energy bills. The cost of living is going up. So it's a very, very important project for us. What we want to do is create opportunities for our residents and our staff within this project. And those opportunities are going to be working with Devon and learning and skills on training in retrofit. There's a range of skills in retrofit that our residents and our staff can be trained in, NVQ level 2s, 3s, 4s and 5s in how to upgrade all of our homes. What we also see as opportunities for our residents in this area is to upskill their technical and their digital skills. And at Teen Housing, we have a Teen Digibug service where our staff engage with our residents and teach them how to get online, teach them how to access the internet, and teach them how to improve their digital skills in a whole raft of software. Last but not least, our New Futures programme, we want to integrate with our Teen Academy as a learning organisation. Learning, training, upskilling is extremely important to us. We offer our staff a range of corporate mandatory training, leadership and career development training. We want to get apprentices in-house around the retrofit areas, but around other skills as well, like digital skills. So what you see in this slide here is a whole host of services that we can offer both our staff and our residents to upskill in retrofit and other areas. Emily mentioned coaching and mentoring. We have recently trained 10 new in-house coaches at Teen Housing that can coach our residents as well as our staff to upskill. And we see this as key to working with our partners to improve opportunities for our residents. Thank you. I'll pass back to Sam now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Karen. So engaging and so much useful information. Thank you very much, Karen. And to everybody watching, I'm sure those of you from the social housing sector will have questions for Karen on that and what they're doing at Teen Housing. Maybe some of you are doing something similar. Maybe you've got some learnings to share. Maybe you want to find out more about how you could do it. So I'm looking at the chat and there's no questions yet. So please post your questions during this next section and we'll come to them at the end in the Q&A. But between now and then, we get to hear from Ian Kaplan at the Department for Work and Pensions. Now, Ian, you're Director for Employment, Youth and Skills at the DWP, and I shall hand over to you to talk now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sam. And it's great to be able to be here to talk about the importance of retraining and inwork progression and what DWP are doing to address the challenges that we are facing in the economy and particularly to support levelling up. I've been really lucky to be working with Sam for some time, and I know from her leadership on the Youth Employment Group previously and the work that she's now involved in with Learning and Work Institute, and indeed that Learning and Work have been doing for many years, that these are issues that are really dear to LWI's hearts, and they are to mine too. As well as being now in DWP and working on employment, youth and skills, I worked in the Department for Education for a number of years prior to that on skills, on adult retraining, apprenticeships and lifelong learning. So I'm really delighted to be able to talk to you about this today. I thought it would be useful to help explain both what DWP is doing now to support people to upskill and retrain, as well as the plans we have to go further on inwork progression. To do so in the context of the steps we've been taking and going through since the start of the pandemic. And in doing that, there are three themes that I was really keen to highlight today. The first is the way in which we've needed to and continue to need to respond to very unusual economic circumstances. More on that in a moment. The second, though, is to be also thinking about how we plan ahead to build future capabilities so that we are not always sort of backwards looking in the things we are trying to tackle. But then the third is the importance of partnerships, and some of that is about working across government services, but I would say as important are the partnerships we can build at a local level, and that's why today's event is such a fantastic one to be a part of. So let me start a bit with where we've come from. We've been committed to putting people first during the pandemic and as part of the government's unprecedented £407 billion support package that's been there to protect jobs and livelihoods. And I think it was essential that during the very first stage of the pandemic, we focused our efforts on supporting the many more people who were suddenly turning to universal credit for financial support. And we doubled our work coaches, we opened more than 150 additional job centres, but we also invested heavily in new support to help people back into work. So Kickstart, for example, a fantastic scheme targeting youth unemployment. We know that young people, by which we mean 18 to 24-year-olds in a DWP context, tend to suffer the most in economic downturns. And so the work that we've been doing to establish more than 150 partnership youth hubs, and as well as putting 130,000 young people so far and counting into Kickstart jobs has been a really vital part of that response. And while unemployment levels are lower than we had probably feared they might be at the start of the pandemic, the Plan for Jobs has been really essential to delivering the employment and skill support that people have needed as the economy shut down and then reopened. And then as we emerge out of the worst of the pandemic, what we have started to see is the labour market really shift. It's a quite an unusual point where, although unemployment is lower than we had feared it might be, we still have relatively high numbers of benefit claimants. But we also have the unusual combination of that with very high numbers of open market labour market jobs. So currently about 1.3 million vacancies out there to be filled. And that's what takes me on to the next stage of our response. And this is the part that was announced very recently by the Prime Minister and our Secretary of State with our new Way to Work campaign, which is there to support 500,000 of our claimants into jobs by the end of June. And when you hear the Secretary of State talks about it, she uses the ABC acronym, so helping people get any job now so that they can then progress onto a better job and then develop their career. So any job, better job, career. So let me just unpack that a bit, because that's really key, I think, to thinking about progression. So first of all, the Way to Work campaign in the short-term focus is all about combining the face-to-face support that our dedicated work coaches can give with employer engagement to help people move into work faster and to fill that record number of vacancies more quickly. And that's really important because given all the challenges we know about cost of living and so on, this is about helping our claimants be better off financially, take advantage of the wellbeing effects that we know work brings, as well as taking advantage of the recent changes we've made to the universal credit taper rates and work allowance so that they can take advantage of those increased earnings. And many of the current job vacancies that we are seeing in sectors are really good opportunities for a lot of our claimants, but they're also opportunities that are vital for our economic recovery. So working together with Department for Education and the devolved administrations, there's a really key role to play in ensuring that people have the right skills to move into these jobs. And I think that's really vital because while many of our claimants can and will move directly into work, we know that others need a bit more support to develop the skills that employers are looking for and the skills that will help them thrive into work. So our work coaches in our job centres have been working really closely with claimants to go further in how we identify skills gaps that they may have and to help our claimants access the skill support that's available. So, for example, they can help refer claimants to provision like apprenticeships, which are obviously very dear to my heart, traineeships, the skills boot camps that DFE colleagues have been setting up, and sector-based work academy programmes, or SWAPs, as we love to refer to them, because we love nothing more than an acronym. And I think SWAPs have proved to be a really fantastic way of supporting people into work by combining short training, work experiences and guaranteed interviews so that people can access jobs that they thought they might not have been able to access otherwise. So working really closely with employers and training providers, back to that point around partnership. SWAPs can help job seekers to upskill, to pivot into sectors with high vacancies, such as construction, health and social care, logistics and warehousing. And we've already had more than 62,000 people start SWAP since last April and more to come over the rest of the year. But we're also looking at ways to provide further skills support, and that's why we launched a campaign called the DWP Train and Progress initiative. And under that allows claimants to agree with their work coach so they can take advantage of up to 12 weeks of full-time work-related training as part of DFE's lifetime skills guarantee, and accessing skills boot camps that can last up to 16 weeks. And those boot camps support local regions to fill vacancies and allow both employed and unemployed people to build sector-specific skills to pivot into new sectors such as HGV driving or green jobs. And I'm really delighted that DWP has been able to work in partnership with DFE in supporting our claimants to access those fantastic opportunities. Thinking about the skills system, then DWP's employment offer is obviously GB-wide, but we know that skills provision has devolved. So we work really closely with all the nations to ensure that our claimants can access skills provision wherever they live and to support them to move into and to progress in local jobs. And that includes working really closely with DFE on the employment and skills pathfinders in England so that we can help ensure really good alignment between the employment and skills systems right at a local level. So really pleased to be working with DFE and with Chambers of Commerce on the local skills improvement plans to help ensure those plans are taking really good account of job seekers' needs. But I said earlier that the Secretary of State's ABC message is any job, a better job and a career. And I've talked about how through Way to Work we can help people find a job. Through the skills work we can help people find better jobs. Let me just bring out that make sure I'm sort of addressing the B and C though, the A, B and C message really thoroughly. because I think that's vital if we're to ensure that people don't get trapped in poorly paid, poor quality work without opportunity for progression. Because we know through research that can trap people in poverty and is really bad for people's health and well-being. So from April, we'll be starting to roll out a new Inwork Progression support offer across all of our job centres. So over time, up to 1.7 million universal credit claimants who are working in low-income jobs will be able to benefit from work coach targeted support, from mentoring and coaching them to acquire new skills or qualifications to increase their earnings in their current role or to help them find a better paid job. We'll also be creating new progression champions in each of our job centre districts who'll be able to work with our work coaches and with our partners to identify and develop local progression opportunities, but also to understand the barriers that we can work to overcome, whether that's around transport or childcare, for example. And I think those partnerships are going to be really vital with local training providers, with employers, chambers of commerces, local authorities. I could go on, but supporting progression is something that DWP can do. I think it's something DWP must do, but it's not something we can do on our own. I think another example of that is how we continue to build our understanding of what works when it comes to help people progress in work. And I'm sure we'll want to come on to this in the panel discussion, but we're really delighted and to welcome the new futures pilots that we've just been hearing about earlier. I think they'll really add to the evidence base on what works to support reskilling around career changes, and it will be fantastic to see the help that people are going to get through those pilots and to engage with them and to learn from them. I think there's a really good read across to some of the work that we've been doing with our plan for job support to help some of the people hardest hit by the pandemic, and to help people back on their feet. So really looking forward to continuing to engage on those. So we're working towards bringing those skills and progression initiatives together, not only to support unemployed people who are looking for work, but also increasingly as we expand through universal credit to support people who are in low income jobs but still receiving benefits, so that they too can access opportunities to develop their skills, to retrain and to progress. And central to that mission will be our commitment to supporting local regions and employers to fill the vacancies they have, to align our skills support with our employment support, and to provide our claimants with the very best opportunities to secure a fantastic future for themselves and for their families. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ian. And very few people know better than Ian the sort of join up between education and skills and employment and work, having sat between those two departments and looking at the join up between the two. So absolutely brilliant insights there, both a rundown of what the department's doing, but also thinking about how you work with others, particularly on the Inwork Progression challenge. Fantastic. Well, we've got a couple of really great questions in the chat, so I shall save mine. I shall go to our delegates first. I'll save my questions till later if we need them. The first one, and unsurprisingly, it is for Karen. And Karen, it's from Julie. I know you've mentioned in the chat, but I just wondered if you could talk a little bit further about that training for staff and residents around retrofit. Sort of how does that actually work? Who are you working with? What are the sort of requirements, and how are you doing that? And I think anybody who's here from the social housing sector would probably be interested in finding a little bit more info from you. So over to you.
Of course, Sam, can you hear me all right?
Yes, can hear you fine.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Julie, so much for your question. Yes, at the moment, we're looking at retrofit qualifications, a level 2, which is an award in understanding domestic retrofit. I'm actually going to do that one myself as well, because I am hoping that myself and members of my team can mentor and coach our involved residents and our other residents in understanding retrofit and helping reduce their energy bills and helping the environment. There's also a level 3 certificate in domestic retrofit advice, which you need a few more kind of like surveying or technical skills to do that one, as you do with the level 4 award in domestic retrofit. And there's a level 5 diploma in retrofit, which our head of repairs is going to undertake. Now, the reason we want to undertake these qualifications, we want to have some of our staff trained up. We are doing them through the Retrofit Academy in Devon, sponsored by Devon County Council. And then what we are going to do is send some of our residents who want to change employment, or who have been unemployed due to the pandemic and they want to gain employment. So we're going to, what we want is a nice mix of staff and residents working together to upskill in retrofit, but to also, for us as staff, to mentor and coach our residents in other skills, because we have a wholly owned subsidiary, as I mentioned earlier, called Templar Home Build, that there's all sorts of skills in that subsidiary, from electrical, plumbing, all of the services that we provide to our tenants. So there will create opportunities in other areas as well for people to upskill. So that's how we're doing it, working with Devon County Council and the Retrofit Academy. As I said earlier, we're already enrolled, just awaiting our dates for training now. And I would love to come back at a future conference or keep in touch with you all and let you know how we're doing and how our residents are finding it, more importantly, and how that's creating employment in the area, certainly in the Newton Abbot area, whilst also helping our environment and our residents.
What a great actual example of the things that we were talking about during this whole conference, which is the join up between housing. You say you're working with Devon County Council, you're working with the Retrofit Academy, so you've got skills, you've got local authority, you've got yourselves, the teen housing. Yeah, and I'm sure lots of people will be interested in sort of those learnings as you go along the way, some of the challenges, but some of the you know, what's really successful there. And just to add to delegates who are watching, we're actually planning to do a sort of quarterly newsletter on new futures and the pilots and what's happening and what developments are there. So if you'd like to sign up to those, then get in contact with Learning and Work, and we can sort of keep you updated on all of that work, but in particular some of the work that you're doing, Karen, which is really leading the way there.
Absolutely, thanks.
Thank you. So moving to a very different type of question, a different focus on employers. There's a question here from Fiona, and I think I'll come to you first, Ian, and then maybe you, Emily, afterwards, if you've got something to add. Is around working with employers. Obviously, when we think about Inwork Progression, people progressing their careers, you know, this is all work with employers. It's all about jobs and the businesses that employ people. But the Fiona's question almost, I'm going to paraphrase it, but always is what's in it for employers. You know, employers want people to do a job. How do you work with employers to help incentivize them to progress people from low pay and to progress people in work? And I wondered if you had any thoughts, particularly Ian, on some of the work that DWP is doing with employers, and then Emily, maybe some of the sort of how do we work with employers and why do we need to sort of question, if that's all right. I'll come to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great question. So I think to start with the sort of, well, what's in it for them? I think we're seeing an unusual moment where I think the answer to this might feel a bit different than it would have done if we were discussing this, you know, 2 or 3 years ago. Because actually we know that employers are in many cases really striving to get the people they need to fill the roles that are essential for them, and including at higher skill levels. So there's probably a greater sort of onus, if you like, on employers at the moment to make sure they really are bringing in the people they need and then developing talent and helping people to progress, because they're in quite a tight labour market in some cases on certain skills. I think that what that then takes you to is, so how do they go about that? So I think there are 2 different aspects to it. One is, I think, some of the initiatives I was describing around making sure that we are using our combination of our education and skills system to really equip people with the skills that employers are looking for. So I think one of the big shifts that DFE has been through over the last few years, and I saw in my time there, was being much more focused around equipping people with occupational skills and qualifications that really met the skills needs that employers have. And I think through local skills improvement partnerships and other things like that, that will continue to go further. And I think technical education reform has been a heart of that. I think the other thing is then the way that employers invest in training themselves. And there are a number of different facets to it, but I think a really important one is how they make use of apprenticeships, because I think apprenticeships are a fantastic way to create skills pathways within organisations. They can be a brilliant way to bring people in at sort of relatively low skill level, entry level roles, but then also to support progression to higher skill roles too. So I think there's a sort of a question for me around whether I think often what more employers can do to take advantage of what is there in the skill system, as well as an onus, frankly, on us in government to make sure those opportunities are there in a way that can be really well used, and then that we're using our different levers to support people in at the right points within organisations so that they can then take advantage of those progression opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good point. That actually there's some great quality routes there from apprenticeships and up the levels, but ensuring that employers know what they are and that they're there, and how to use them for their own workforce, and encouraging that. Thank you, Ian. Emily, I wondered if you wanted to add anything around employers, working with employers.
Yeah, I think one of the tensions when we're thinking about kind of upskilling and progression is that sometimes we're kind of thinking about progression out of the organisation, and you know, we know that's something that employers do worry about. I think particularly for smaller and medium-sized employers, it's important that they understand how upskilling and those higher technical skills could actually benefit their business. So what are their ambitions for growth and perhaps diversification of their business, and how upskilling their staff and giving those routes of progression can actually have those business benefits. So it's not just about what are you doing for your staff. As Ian said, we do need kind of better alignment with training, not just in terms of the content of that training, but how it's delivered. So that if that isn't accessible for people who are in work or for employers, then that's not an attractive or possible option. And hopefully with the local skills improvement plans, we'll see better alignment as we get chambers of commerce joining up with training providers and employers at a local level, and then also the strategic development fund, making sure there's that infrastructure there and that providers are working together as well. So I think it's just about that focus on what is the benefit for the business, as well as the individuals within that business too.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's a sort of well, the question was about incentives, but what's the motivation of the employers? But also thinking about back to the beginning of the conference, which was around the macro trends around, you know, green skills, green opportunities for employers that will impact not just employers working in green skills areas, but actually nearly all employers will be impacted in some way. What do they need to think about? What do they need to think about reskilling and retraining to take advantage of opportunities coming? Also, you know, jobs at risk of automation. What do employers need to think about? How do they improve their productivity? What does that mean about reskilling their workforce? I think there's some really big trends here that actually you know, making that real to what a business needs to do is really important. So totally right. Emily and Ian both flagging that up. And Emily has very helpfully put in the chat the actual email address if you want to keep up to date on the New Futures pilots, which would include Karen's work, as well as the other pilots across the UK, which are in the different nations and different areas. So that is in the chat if you can access that. I just had another question myself, in case anybody else wants to add in. We've got a little bit of time, but I think I'm really interested in the local. I mean, the whole conference, this conference is about levelling up places, and that focus on the local. And I just wondered from our speakers' perspectives, you know, how important is locality when thinking about this big issue about sort of retraining and career change? When you're thinking about the solutions to it, when we're thinking about what those challenges look like locally, why is locality important? And Emily, I thought I'd come to you first, because I mean, when you're talking about the New Futures pilots, you're talking about sort of very specific local area pilot doing different things, and I wondered what was the motivation behind that approach?
Yeah, so the motivation behind that approach was, first of all, the impact of the pandemic hasn't been evenly spread across the country, and how that has, the fallout within the labour market kind of looks different. But I think even aside from the pandemic, our local economies look very different to each other. And so if we're going to think about reskilling and where the opportunities are, then we need to look at a local level, where are the jobs going to be, where is their potential growth, perhaps where are the sectors that are in decline and the jobs aren't going to be in the future. And then who you work with within the local area looks different too. So whether that's a combined authority or at local authority level, who the key employers are. In some areas of the country, we have kind of very large employers, but across a lot of the country, we're looking at smaller and medium-sized businesses. And the provider landscape looks very different in terms of who's offering employment support, who's offering careers advice and training provision. So I think at a local level, those things need joining up, which is why we're taking that kind of local focus with a New Futures pilot, and then also with that added element of the pandemic as well, and how that has affected areas very differently depending on how their economies are shaped.
And great point there, and people on sort of lower skills maybe being the ones to miss out, and that's absolutely right. Karen, I just want to turn to you and say, well, obviously you're locally based, but what does it mean to you around focusing locally, join up locally, now more than ever? Is that a cliche or is that a real thing?
Absolutely more than ever, because our partnership working is so important to us. We all know the challenges of the housing market. We all know that social housing, there's long waiting lists, and as somebody's been putting in the chat, Sam, low paid jobs, it's very difficult to work in low paid jobs and also cope on certain levels of wages and have time to study. So it's really important that we use every opportunity that we can to support our local people who understand the areas, they understand the challenges, and to kind of grow better communities and improve housing, improve employment opportunities. We can only do that in partnership. And, at Teen Housing, we want to play our part. And the New Futures project is looking at it covers the green agenda, but we also want to create opportunities for our residents who are unemployed to gain skills that they are going to progress in. They are going to be able to increase their salaries as they go on. They are going to be able to branch out into other areas of employment, not just with us at Teen, but across the whole community. As Ian said earlier, it's so important for employers to support each other. And it's about creating prosperous communities where people are getting well paid for a job well done, they have a good, safe, healthy, happy home, and a good life.
That's a great slogan. We should have that at the bottom of the breakout. That's really nicely summed up. And I was just thinking that sort of stronger communities, prosperous communities, yes, is at the heart of that, and the many different facets that contains. Thank you, Karen. Ian, turning to you, and just to mention that in the chat there is a big support, it seems to be, for a focus on helping people to develop whilst in work, which is great to see from the delegates. Ian, just thinking about that, sort of going down to the local, some of the schemes you talked about were national, but some are being run through the local job centres, just that, the balance between the two, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and let me pick up some of the points in the chat, because I think there's some really good comments that particularly the ones Fiona, Anne and Fabian have been putting here are really good. So first, I think for DWP, although we are a big national organisation, in one respect, we're actually an exceptionally local organisation. We exist on most high streets across the country. We have 770 odd job centres, so we're a very local organisation, I think. And I think that matters, because if you're talking about retraining, so I think the point I really agree with in chat is the barriers to someone to go through quite a big change in terms of the career they're in, who they're working for, the skills they need. The barriers to making that sort of change are really high. And we know that, and I've seen loads of that in work I've done, and Learning Work have published some fantastic stuff on this over the years, I know. So for someone to go through that, what you need really is the really strong motivation and the confidence that if I put myself through all of that, if I take up those training opportunities, there are real jobs at the end of it. So it's one thing for national government to say our priority is, and I don't know, training more engineers to build wind turbines, but actually that's no use to somebody if that growth isn't happening locally to them. So what's much more important is that we focus things like sector-based work academy programs or skills boot camps around real job opportunities that are being created locally, so that people are being trained with skills which is a genuine local demand, and so they have a real sense of confidence that by undertaking that training, by investing in themselves in that way, that actually it will put them closer to a genuine job opportunity and make that and remove some of the risk, I think, out of that that retraining and upskilling process. And you can only do that by taking a really localized focus. I don't think you can do that by only looking at things at a national level. I think that's all about that localism coming through.
Yeah, and the local agenda. I suppose you can have the grand aim of the government, the sort of high skill, high wage economy, but that will only be realised by working in the communities and with the local employers and the local skills system as well. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ian. I think there have been some really great comments and some really great questions. I think we've covered a lot of ground and we've only got 3 minutes left. So if I asked another one, you'd only have a tiny amount of time to answer it. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up. Thank you very much to our speakers, to Emily, to Karen and to Ian. A great different perspectives that you've all brought to this conversation. But also I've been really interested in the amount of interest in this agenda, in thinking about people progressing in work. I know that the government is thinking about it a lot. I know that some local areas are thinking about it a lot. How do we build that into these levelling up plans, these missions that the government set? How do we realise those? And I think that's a great start to the conversation today. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you again to our speakers. Thank you everyone who joined on the chat and posed some great questions. I'm just going to put in the chat the link to the next bit, because there's going to be a break now. We've got our final speaker, who's John Yates, who's the head of the Youth Endowment Fund, who's going to talk to us about how we bring together a more fractured society, thinking about levelling up, thinking about all the things we've talked about today. But thank you, and I hope you enjoy your break, and we'll see you when we're speaking to John Yates at 12:15. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Sam.
Thanks.